Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Jesse Anderson and Jan Bigas of Quackalope, a weekly podcast and YouTube channel of the same name, focused on board games, mechanics, context, theme, and game design. Whether it be reviews, previews, unboxings, gameplay, or just fun storytelling, Quackalope is there for you. Jan, Jesse, welcome to the Binge. Guys, how you doing?
Hey.
Doing well. Thank you for having us. You did miss that we're the most aviary focused, board game content channel in the market. I'll forgive you for it.
Also, flavor text, unfortunately, lots of flavor text everywhere.
I know. I have that in the actual show notes, but I went through that kind of decision-making process of, do I run the risk of getting tongue-tied?
That's fair.
in this whole kind of setup, or do we just kind of get into the whole Quackalope when we get in there, and I'll just start her off a little raw? So we're
very bird forward. We're kind of board game adjacent, mostly bird forward though.
If you ever come to Quackalope HQ, you will be hard pressed to not find a bird in every single inch of our apartment. Jesse has made it his mission to put a bird here, a bird there, a bird there, a bird there, a bird everywhere.
So let's hit the elephant in the room, because a lot of people are probably wondering, what the heck is a Quackalope? Maybe let's just start there before we go anywhere. What is a Quackalope?
Yeah, I'd say species of duck that lives over in the eastern part of the United States, mostly in the Appalachian Mountain region. They produce small protrusions or horns that allow them to mate and sort of protects their forest-dwelling nests. Those horns then shed mid-fall. They migrate down south and oftentimes look very similar to kind of wood ducks or similar of alike. It's one of the reasons why there's a rumor that the white-tailed deer population has been so prolific in this area, is the shedding horns from the quackalope sort of weigh the numbers differently.
So that's the definition, I guess, if we look it up in a Wikipedia perhaps. But how did you guys kind of come up with this whole identity of Quackalope? Where'd it come from?
So genuine, it was like most names that are weird and interesting and come from absolutely nowhere sort of spur, right? Sitting around a table with a bunch of friends trying to figure out what a title for a board game show should be. And there was a lot of generic names. There was a lot of, all offline or, my table plays game, just weird little, like, direct as possible type of titles. And then we started going down rabbit holes and filtering through, and we got to a point where one of my friend's wives sort of spoke up, and she was like, what about a Quackalope? And it sort of stuck. And a week later, it was still sort of there. And I searched online, and there was nothing else that existed that had the title or had the terminology Quackalope. And it is harder to associate it with board games. But once you do, or once you get to kind of start building and developing that brand, it is fun and lively, and we get to define what it is. And so I had a friend who works for Beam Santori, does their graphic design for one of the largest liquor distillers in the country. He designed our logo, and from there it sort of existed. And
so now you guys have kind of split the personality. So you're like the duck, right? In the relationship. Jan's the goose, I guess.
Yep.
Right.
Honk. Quackalope adjacent. Yeah, we figured geese were fairly adjacent.
So where'd you guys meet? Like, how far back does this go? Have you guys been like lifelong friends, or?
No, so here's the interesting thing. Back a few years ago, I was going through this transitional period in my life where I kind of wanted to delve back into creative hobbies, because I had distanced myself very much so when I moved over to the States. And in that journey, I started creating content for video games, writing articles and doing these type of things. But that website, or that place that I was working at for free, of course, freelancing and all that, also was trying to establish a board game panel or a board game section. And I love the board games. I've loved them since I started college. And so I started trying to think and maneuver a way, how exactly do we grow this platform? So one day I was in Labyrinth Games and Puzzles here, back over in DC. Yeah. And there was this really weird dude with a camera walking around everywhere, really flustered, just like getting in everyone's face. And
I asked you permission if I could film
I
your
wasn't.
table.
Wait. Did you feel identified by the annoying part? I wasn't really actually talking. Either way, so there's this person going around, and I remember asking, like, who the heck? Like, who is that? Like, are you guys making a movie about Labyrinth? And then I got a little bit of context. Oh, that's just some dude, content creator that's doing stuff. His name is Jesse or something. Another Jesse, not you, Jesse, by the way. No, but seriously, Jesse. And I was like, oh, they're doing board game content. Maybe I could partner with them and somehow, and we can leverage both platforms together. And when I discovered his content, I was like, whoa, what is this? This is crazy. Because this was during Jesse's more exploratory portion during Quackalope, where he was doing like heavy B-roll, very upfront, like a lot of beautiful shots, which are still prevalent throughout all our content, but specifically at the beginning there were even more there, right? And so I was blown away by that, and so I reached out. I was like, hey, I'm part of a large video game platform, and we're interested in collaborating with you. Funny thing is, Jesse's a businessman, so he immediately saw through that, but he was curious as to what I had to say.
He had no comments anywhere on any of his articles. They were very well written, though.
Yeah. Not my, like the website as a whole did not have, by the way, not just mine. Anyways. So we ended up meeting at a coffee shop very romantically in Georgetown. Like,
I chose a public space. I didn't know who it was I was meeting with.
I didn't know either, man.
Safety in public, right? You never know.
Yeah.
It's true.
And we had a conversation, and the conversation basically ended up in Jesse being very resistant to collaborating because he didn't really know what I could offer him from that side. But we kind of stayed in contact that one day Jesse needed to play some games that he didn't know and hadn't brought to the table before, and he thought of me. I was like, hey, that guy, sure, let me call him and ask him if he wants to do this. And since the first video we ever did, we just kind of clicked in a way that I've never been able to really understand. And that's how it all started.
So long story short, Jan is and was a fan of mine. And now he lives with me. So I think that should give all other fans hope that they too can become Quackalope.
There you go. Now
they're adjacent.
This was like 2 years ago, was this?
This was about a year and a half ago for Jan, maybe getting close to 2 years now. For Quackalope as a platform, we're probably
2.5 years?
About 2 and 3 months in at this point. And I was doing it for probably 6 to 8 months before Jan started becoming involved. The big thing for me, and I guess the moral or the overarching narrative of the story, is I really believe in doing your best to give someone whatever opportunity that you can if they ask. So if a fan wants to collaborate or a content creator wants to visit or film or do something, like, why not? Like, and so Jan reached out and we met and he seemed willing. And so I think one of the things that has made our platform unique is that everyone that I've had on the channel, for the most part, has been just a friend of mine in my gaming group or in my gaming circle that I have desperately convinced to get in front of the camera and then somehow made it not as awkward as being in front of the camera is for most people.
What your background? So what were your backgrounds coming into this? So maybe Jan, start with you, and then we'll get into Jesse's side. So Jan, what were you doing before this?
Yeah. So I've been a little bit of everywhere during my professional history or just my career overall. I studied architecture back in Puerto Rico. Graduated from an architecture school, and if I wanted to, I could potentially start studying for an architecture degree, all that stuff. But I didn't decide to pursue the career in its entirety, right? I didn't feel like the right profession for me, so I started pivoting a little bit. During that pivot, I did a little bit of business development, but it was very cursory. And then I landed into what I'm doing now, which is art direction. So I'm an art director in DC. We deal with all types of projects and collateral. So I know all about printing, and I know all about dealing with clients and managing roles and understanding timelines and all that type of stuff. It's not things that I'm able to implement yet in the board game sphere, but it is definitely part of my tool set in a way.
And certainly that's very complimentary, I guess, to your background, right, Jesse? So can you talk a little bit about what
I have been unemployed since college, which is going on about 8 years now of just, I'll rephrase that. I have been self-employed since college. which is going on 8 years now. So I started and left college doing wedding photography, and videography full time. Moved more into the event and commercial space, which ended up with me kind of moving to Washington, D.C. and doing some stuff with nonprofits in that area. And then after a series of, unfortunate events in my life that resulted in a breakup and a move back home and, me psychologically rebuilding myself, I decided that if I wanted to pursue a future and I had the time to do so, I would pursue the version of a career and the version of a life that I think would be the best, right? If I can give myself a 5-year window. And that answer was board games. I was into them. I'd found a community and a home and a way to relate with people. I absolutely loved playing them, but more so than that, it was probably the first hobby that I ever got into that went beyond kind of work. And so my theory was, let's turn it into work, which probably isn't the healthiest approach, but it works.
It becomes a jobby, I guess they call it, right?
But yeah, that was, I then tried to apply my career in technology and equipment that I had and some degree of skill, although I've improved substantially over the last 2 years, just doing videos multiple times a week. I'm so much better than I was when I first started, but yeah, I applied that into the board game space. And I thought there was a marketplace that could use higher quality video production.
Well, certainly. And we got Mike Bruner in the lobby here just commenting on the video and sound quality from your videos. I would echo that as well. I mean, that's, what first got me to know about you guys and say, gosh, we got to get these guys on the podcast. Your videos are very, very well done. And it's interesting when you look at content creators, especially in this industry. I always love to go back to like the first video, right? And besides the fact that you obviously had shorter hair back then.
I did. I have not cut my hair. I've trimmed it, but I have not actually cut my hair for the 2 years that has existed on the channel. So sometime I'm going to take a screenshot of every frame, every video, and just time lapse my hair getting longer and longer and longer. And then the beard starting to develop. It'll be a good journey.
It's shockingly short in that first video.
It is. It's completely buzzed. It is completely, and I look very respectable.
Not Jan short, but it's still short.
Yeah. Well, what do you think for me, Jesse? Do you think you'll see a lot of change throughout the years too? For me as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. At least a little bit.
So I would echo the sentiment, but the one thing that you notice when you look at kind of that journey of content creation, many content creators, you see a gradual kind of progression, right? You see kind of them sometimes camera phone in video one, right? All the way through to, kind of more of a polished, format, at this, when they finally get to kind of scale with their audience. And what I found very interesting about you guys, which I think is a testament to the talent, right, is even that first video is very high quality, right? It's like the production value of that right from day one, I think was probably a signal to most people who are following you that this is going to be something special, right? Like these guys are creating visually appealing content. The other thing I would say is that, and I was curious if you've taken any kind of, did you take any drama or was there any kind of narration when you were in college? And I'm sure you've heard this before. I'm sure I'm not the first person saying it, but your narrative approach is very good, right? Like it is very, very well produced. So I don't know if it's based on, doing multiple takes or having a very good script in front of you, or it's just your personal style. But I think most people would probably echo that.
So other than some 10-minute or less videos that are directly and clearly scripted because the audio is different and you can tell there's no me in front of the camera. Yeah. Anytime you've seen myself solo or Jan or any of our guests in front of the camera, there's not ever been a single script. When it comes to multiple takes, we usually don't have to do multiple takes on anything other than rules and rules corrections. We'll try to refine those or double check the rule book if we stumble along something or try to say something clearer. But gameplays and conversational videos and right for you, wrong for you videos, all of those are just conversations. And you talk about the narrative approach. So, I mean, I grew up in Kentucky. I grew up in the South. I grew up with an art and appreciation for storytelling. And throughout my teenage years, I've always had a bit of a knack for public speaking, and sort of being able to be long-winded and get somewhere eventually. But I also, when I was younger, sort of honed my teeth in sort of an evangelical Christian environment. And so for a lot of my teenage years, my trajectory was sort of becoming an evangelist or a preacher or kind of a traveling. And so that skill set, while not the career that I'm currently pursuing, that skill set has certainly come to aid me. I've never done drama or anything along those lines. I think I would have enjoyed it as a kid, but I switched high schools a lot. I switched middle schools a lot, and I barely connected with anyone at either of them. So I could have used a drama club, but I never ended up in one.
And I just echo that. Certainly that experience has aided you well in this new format, right? And I think that the evangelical now is board games, right? You're spreading the board game world.
Listen, it's not. I'm not gonna agree with this, but there have been members of our community that have talked about the concept of whether or not Quackalope and Quack in general could be cult-like. And I'm not sure it is, but I think the first start to creating something along those lines is everyone going, is this a cult? Well, if it is, we're okay with it.
Yeah. And then pairing that,
Jan's sitting here going, are you really talking about that?
Yeah, exactly.
If it cranks the subs up, why not?
Listen,
why not?
If I get someone to smile or laugh at least for a second, I feel like whatever story I've just told is worthwhile. And also, we're looking at plots of land in Canada to have a whole community move to. So if you're interested, let us know. Well,
absolutely.
We have a fan who's looking at private islands. So we'll get there one day.
Big patch of grass somewhere. We'll build a bunch of little houses. It'll be fantastic. ducks in the pond right next to it. So, and I don't want to kind of just focus entirely on the YouTube channel, because you guys have got this other massive channel, which is your podcast. So that you've partnered up with Alex from Board Game Co. So how did that kind of come about?
It's going to be all Jan.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So when we unfortunately had to separate from states, Jesse had to move back in Kentucky last year due to
the world sort of quit, and
something happened last year. I don't know what it was.
I don't really remember.
Yeah, it's a little bit foggy.
For some reason, I lost every event contract that I had locked in for an entire year. I don't know why. It must be me, but either way, I moved back.
Amnesia,
I moved back in with my dad and said, "Hello, I'm 27. Can I live with you?"
And so I was kind of left in DC with not much, like this thing that I was doing constantly with Jesse just kind of evaporated into everything. And I've always wanted to be like Jesse's partner in crime. Like I've always wanted to assist Jesse, because as you've said, Jesse will always be the talent in a lot of ways, but I want to be able to always support and help him and move his dream and the dream that we are now building together forward. Right. So when that transition happened, I was trying to look for ways that I could support Jesse from afar and help Quackalope do something, because I didn't want to be associated with Quackalope if I wasn't doing something for Quackalope. It just didn't feel fair, right? I always have this need of needing to earn something, right? And so we started brainstorming and trying to think.
Just letting him have the title, but he wasn't.
Jesse's always been like that, but I cannot coexist knowing that I'm not pulling my weight in something, right? So we started talking, we started kind of like coming up with ideas, and during this time frame. Remember, you already said it. Quackalope is synonymous with quality and B-roll and beautiful takes and cinematography. And obviously having webcam chats over on the YouTube channel was not something that Jesse was currently open to. So we started looking. So, okay, we won't be able to do content together often. What can we do? Oh, how about I pick you up once a month?
I did that multiple times.
For stretches of 8 hours to and fro, so that we can record videos along a weekend.
It was only 40 hours of driving on my behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So you physically actually drove back and forth. So this was remotely.
Multiple times. Yeah. The first probably 3 months. I think I did it 3 or 4 times where I drove from Kentucky to DC to pick up Jan, to drive back to Kentucky to film over the weekend, and then vice versa to drop him off.
I remember having a lot of apprehension around this idea because my first critique towards Jesse was like, sure, that'd be awesome that I could like record with you and be on the channel and be productive. But that sounds like a lot. Like that doesn't sound sustainable. Are we sure we can actually do this well? And Jesse is very stubborn. It's one of his traits. And he said, of course we can. Yeah, no problem. No issue. And eventually we reached to another point of the conversation where it was like, okay, we have enough content here, but I still don't feel like I'm doing enough, Jesse. I want to keep being able to help you all that, like, what can I do to be constantly collaborating? And then Jesse started talking about, well, you know, like part of any successful channel or enterprise is that you touch on multiple platforms simultaneously. Yeah. That is a way that you grow something. And one of the things that we haven't been able to do just because of the time and the difficulty of making that happen is a podcast. I've never done a podcast before. I've never had long format conversations around this. I tend to actually be kind of quiet depending on the circumstances. I'm a little bit shyer than what Jesse is.
I don't believe it.
It depends on how you catch me. But point is that I've never had that type of formal training that Jesse had. I was in a band before. And I used to have like
I didn't have formal training. I just was in the church.
Yeah. Well, depending on what direction you were taking the church, either way. So we decided to start the podcast. And during that process, we started brainstorming like, oh, what formats could we do? What things can happen? And that's how we landed on two major things. We had multiple ideas, but the two major things was a short format, review style where instead of playing a game multiple times, we play it once because it is the reality of our industry. It is the reality of how
you got to get games. The line in. You got to get the line in. First impression matters. And so we made a podcast
about ours.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Jan Bigas, and with me is the enigmatic. And the secondary format that we thought would be really fun was a variety show, right? And I always get that word wrong. I can never pronounce it correctly. Variety show.
You're saying?
I like it.
That one. Okay.
I like it more the way you pronounce it.
Yeah, you're ways better. I just got a
Español.
crazy Canadian accent. Don't worry about me.
So we decided to do that, but we felt that it needed something else. We always like the idea of having multiple hosts here, and we were trying to think of the perfect person to do that. And now from this part of the conversation, now that we have context as to how the podcast started, I'm going to give it back to Jesse so we know how Alex got roped into all of this.
Oh, and if anyone's listening also, the podcast is just under the Quackalope podcast. Both the Weekly Quack and Played It Once function underneath that main arching title.
So we'll actually put that in the show notes. So when we do the show notes on the podcast, check out the show notes. We'll put links there so people can easily find that.
Cool. Appreciate that. But so Board Game Co. is a rising star in the board game industry. I think now he is the most engaged Kickstarter content creator at the moment. I believe if you look at his view count, which most people pay attention to, like subscriber numbers or anything along those lines, that's not really where you want to pay attention. Pay attention to view count and numbers. Mm-hmm. I believe he has passed nearly everyone that deals with Kickstarter content in our industry. Yeah. And his next target when it comes to view count is like shut up and sit down when it comes to the amount of content that's consumed.
He's killing it.
Yeah, he's doing incredible. And so we got lucky that we discovered him before he was giant. Through him discovering us, he did a video promoting and talking about content creators that he admired in the space. And we actually weren't on the first version of his video, but he ended up pausing and delaying and then refilming another one. And between that time, the world had shut down, and I'd put out probably my first direct-to-camera video that was as honest and heartfelt as possible, trying to let people know why the studio is moving and why things were changing and what our approach is going to be. And that seemed to strike a chord with Alex. And so he included us in his top 10 list. He was about at probably 5,000 subscribers at the time, maybe a little bit lower. And I think we'd already or just past 10. And so I was very flattered, sort of reached out to him. I enjoyed his content. We began talking. And since then, it's just blossomed into a really, really good friendship. I'd say that out of everything, like let's say Quackalope fails and, we no longer are involved in the industry or do anything in this space, or we go on separate ways or do separate careers, which is in no way the plan, but life has a weird way of twisting things. The relationship and time that I've been able to build and spend with both Jan and Alex, hands down would make, 50, 60 hours a week for 2.5 years now. Worth it across the board. I am incredibly grateful that I have both of those individuals. And so, yeah, Alex was the perfect kind of third addition to the podcast, third
the
voice
analytical
that we needed.
one.
He's analytical. He's purposeful. He talks about numbers and statistics and breaks down Kickstarters based off of what's going to be a good value for you. And if it can, if the Kickstarter will have good resale market later on down the road.
Yeah.
And then he's just now started to bring his family and his kind of close community onto the show a little bit more, which I've had the honor of being able to spend time with Rena and Shira and Ricky, his daughter, and play games with him. And it's just, he has such a good group of people around him. And
Amazing.
And then, Jan, you also have, can you talk a little bit about Quackalope?
Sí, Quackalope. So Quackalope is our foray into Spanish content, Spanish-only content in a way, because we are planning on doing some bilingual series and things like that, Spanglish coverage as well. But basically, when I grew up in Puerto Rico, I really didn't have a community at all that was into board games or that was into geek culture to start with. And that's not necessarily all of Puerto Rico. That was specifically my hometown. But either way, my context was barren of anything that brought me that type of joy. And so my intention, or our intention with creating Quackalope, is to try and show that kid, that me, hey, there's something else that you could be doing with your time. There's something else that you could do to bond with friends that you can have fun with, that doesn't involve the TV or doesn't involve a computer screen. Mm-hmm. You're accepted. Like there are more people out there like you. So don't feel alone anymore and just start having more fun. And it's going to be a bridge between, most publishers that only tend to focus on English speak and, North American releases or
which makes sense for the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Just trying to create bridges. Basically, Quackalope is a bridge, un puente, to try and merge two very different demographics into a single whole. Bring everybody to the table.
A good example is we have a prototype of Monster Hunter World, downstairs. Like that is a prototype that is expensive to produce and only gets shipped out to a few content creators. And the cool thing is, even though Quackalope is growing and not that big yet, and we're still figuring out what the balance point is between, I think I currently am trying to produce 14 to 16 videos a week across the different media platforms that we have. And Jan's doing his best to edit, to be in a multiple and then edit multiple and then also run the podcast. And he also is in charge of, a variety of other collaborators that we have. And so even though we're still figuring out, part of the cool concept or theory is the fact that we'll be able to get Monster Hunter down on the table and do English content for it. That's what it was sent to us for. Main channel, Quackalope, we're excited. But Quackalope gets an opportunity to just sit down and also talk about it in Spanish, in a different language, and something that other people can relate to, or if they're bilingual, can choose which version they want to engage with. And I wouldn't expect a publisher to mail that copy off to a 300 subscriber Spanish speaking channel. It just doesn't logistically make sense, but it does make all the sense in the world for us to start building that community so that 5 years or 10 years down the road, that publisher has a new marketplace they can kind of dip into a little bit.
And also people in the Spanish speaking community.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I can see the efficiency of that as well, right? If you want to get multiple languages on the same game, you can send one copy to one group and get it done.
Well, we're also, there's another thing that I'm working on that, and this is all, it's one of those things where it's like, give away all your best ideas as much as possible so that other people can execute on them and you're not responsible for them anymore. So I'll let people know one of the things I'd love to do. And if they want to take charge of it and just add me to the list, please, dear God, do it. I would love to have a network of close content creators like Alex and I do currently, or Table Knots down in Kentucky. One of my friends that started as a fan on Quackalope, joined us for the show, and now has launched his own board game channel that's doing really well. I would love to be at a point where we get a game in from a publisher, and a lot of those prototypes end up sitting with us, or, we have a month or 2 months to cover them. I'd love to get a game in, cover it, do good quality content, and then have a rotation of other content creators that the publisher doesn't even need to ask about. It's just automatically part of the conversation that our network, our little pocket of friends that we have, no matter what size their channel is, once we're done with a prototype, they get access to it. Now, the hard part is figuring out who goes, I believe in relationships above everything. And so, I have a lot of people that I kind of add to that list, but I need to get like a public email chain going or a document where they can all log in and say what they want. And then I have to reconcile my own desire to never go to the post office. And there's a lot of steps there that get in the way. But I would love to have that. I'd love to have just this general community-wide sense of it makes sense for a publisher to send me something fancy, but it doesn't make sense for that thing to just sit with me. And if I can continue sending that around, Tiny Epic Dungeon was a good example. I filmed that, covered it with Max, handed it off to him, and his videos are the biggest videos he's ever had on his channel. Probably gained him 400 or 500 subscribers from that alone. So why not?
And in that case, would you provide the B-roll then to those people as well?
It depends on what they're looking for. I'm happy to share any content that we produce. It takes time to cut B-roll and processes in a way that could hand it out to people.
Sure.
But yeah, I'd be open to anything and everything. I just slowly and surely over the course of the next few years, I'd like to continue investing in people and building community and figuring out ways to collaborate with people as opposed to our industry has a habit of sort of absorbing people into banners. And I understand the framework. I understand the mindset behind that. But logically, I think it's much more valuable for me to have a relationship with Board Game Co. and have Board Game Co. to have nothing to do with Quackalope. Like, he's not Quackalope. I don't control what he says. I'll show up on his channel every now and then. But at the end of the day, that's his platform. And his audience is there for his content. It wouldn't make sense for us to merge our channels together. All we'd have would be 20,000 people watching both of us under the same thing. It just
strategic alliances makes more sense than merging.
Yeah, it's how we grow. It's shocking that our industry doesn't have any content creators that are over the 1 million mark. I mean, think about, I could go on YouTube right now and look up Ants Canada would be a channel of a guy that does voiceover for his ant farm collection. You could look up Wranglestar, which is a homesteader out in the Midwest that talks about tools that you can buy on Amazon. You could look up woodworkers or bird watchers, or D&D and RPG players if you want to get a little bit closer to home. Our industry has not done a great job at keeping up with media and keeping up with sort of the cultural trends. There's a lot of marketplaces that are bigger than us. And it's sort of interesting as to why. And I think part of my theory is strategic collaboration is how some of these other channels have gotten to where they are.
Yeah. So on that note, where do you see Quackalope going? Is the intent to be a media company? Is it to be a gaming company?
Well, if Jan and I live together, I believe it's 8 years in Maryland before it's common law. And so, I've got big plans.
Marriages. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
I think so basically one of the first short-term goals is going to be to have us both go full-time into this, right?
Yeah.
This has become both of our dreams and both of our passions. And right now we don't have the finances or just the groundwork to make that happen yet. We're getting closer.
And the goal wasn't ever at 2 years. The goal from the very beginning was it'll take 5 years to get to some place that's really cool. And so where we are now, I don't want to understate how grateful and insane it is where our community is and how much they've supported us and what we've been able to do and start doing over the course of the last year. In 2 years. It's mind-blowing.
Crazy.
But 5 years is the goal. And so, we're not in a rush. We're willing to be patient and continue working.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think what we're trying to do is that we're trying to expand closer and closer to things that deal with community, right? The more that we've grown our channel and the more that we've understood how people interact with the type of content that we do, all we want to do is just be closer to those fans, right? So I'm not sure if that means that we're going to be a media company or we're going to be this or we're going to be that, but I can assure you that whatever it is at the end of the day will always go back to the people are the most important.
Well, and the funny thing is both of you at the very beginning of the show made fun of my storytelling and podcasting. But
I actually complimented your storytelling. Well, that's
okay. No, I mean, I'm inclined to believe that anyone that mentions it is picking on me about it. That's, Jan's really boiled that, sort of traumatized me in that way. But the other exciting thing and the other thing that in part, I don't know how publicly announce this is yet, and I probably won't put official names on it, but like there are currently 2 publishers that Jan and I are working with, collaborating with. So we are signed on as lead or at least assistant developers on a title that is heavily story driven at the moment.
Wow.
We are insanely excited about it, and we cannot wait to share it with people. They already have seen it; they just don't know we're tied to it yet. And so that's something we're really excited about going into more of the development phase, working on the mechanic systems of the game and also the lore and the storytelling. And then Ivy Studios, Veiled Fate, their $1 million goal for Veiled Fate was a lore compendium written by Quackalope. And so we are currently in the process of working through and developing backstory and lore and theme and actually creating not only a really interesting, I think, world that's built around that game, but then also a mechanics compendium that allows you to integrate flavor text and story into your game experience if it's something you want, with story that ties to every event and scenario it happens, with introductory prologues that allow you to set the stage for the game, and then resulting or ending narratives for each one of the characters who might end up victorious. And so we're doing stuff. Like, it's not all media. We're starting to venture out into being official flavor texters, and I cannot wait to put that on my business card.
And technically, we also kind of have some ideas for games from us, but
those will never show up. Yeah.
Those are far away.
Never say never, eh? So how best do people follow you? So people that don't already follow you, and
if you turn to a strong southern wind, and just from the deep bellows of your soul, release one shrill crack into the sky, that quack will carry until it reaches us, and we'll reach out to you.
Fantastic. Or just Google Quackalope.
But for those that don't live in a fantasy world,
that's
we're on the podcast. Click on our show notes, and
we're kind of the only thing that exists around Quackalope. And so if you search Quackalope anywhere, you'll be able to find sort of a media source or a way to connect with us.
Yeah. Yep, which is a combination between a quack and a jackalope, or antelope.
Not also. A jackalope. How dare you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Antelope.
Don't bring up
quack
that mythical
and antelope
creature
together.
Jan, Jesse, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing more content come from you guys.
Thank you so very much for having us.
You take care.
Hey, this is great.
Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.